I got the invitation to go on this Armed Lutheran radio show, though. You know this guy? Have you seen this? There's two things that I would like to say that make me feel safe. Number one, the fact that there is a radio show called the Armed Lutheran Podcast somewhere in the world. That makes me feel safer.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran. This is episode number 372. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week again this week. For those of you who are returning, thank you for coming back, and thank you for listening. Those of you who are brand new to the show, welcome aboard. Hope you enjoy what you hear, and you'll check out the back catalog, all 371 episodes, and stick around for more next week. We would love to have you come back. This week we have a variety show that is, for those of you who are new, we have content from members of the cast. That would be Mia Anstein and Sergeant Bill Sylvia. Hopefully we'll be hearing from Pastor John Bennett next week. Next week should be our online hangout for the Reformation Gun Club. This week was supposed to be, I scheduled a variety show for this week because this week was supposed to be crazy weekend, long hours working on a project for work, but the client that I'm working with decided to postpone that project until next month. So we'll be doing we've got a variety show now, and we will have our monthly online hangout next week. I believe I suggested during last week's show that the hangout would be next Saturday. It will not. I believe my daughter made the volleyball team again this year, and I believe they have a tournament next weekend. So Saturday would probably not be the greatest idea because I don't know if I will be back in time for the hangout. So we will be doing the hangout either Friday or Thursday. I'm going to check with the cast and see who can do what, but look for an announcement on the in the Facebook group. Probably later today or tomorrow, as we put out the plans for the Gun Club online hangout for August 2023. Speaking of the Reformation Gun Club, Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded, and that means we rely on our listeners and not advertising to help pay the bills and keep the lights on here at Armed Lutheran Radio. And the people who make this happen are what we call the Reformation Gun Club. And our members are making this show possible through their monthly and yearly contributions. And this week, I want to give a big thank you and shout out to JJ from Toms River, New Jersey, Stuart from Pennsylvania, Pensacola, Florida, Greg from Holly, Michigan, Daniel from Chehalis, Washington, Steve from Grovetown, Georgia, William from Bentonville, Arkansas, Edwin from Round Lake Beach, Illinois, Curtis from Junction City, Kansas, Justin from Berryville, Arkansas, and Paul from McKinney, Texas. I just noticed that a bunch of the people in that randomly selected list all are regular attendees to our monthly online hangouts. And that is one of the great perks of being a member of the Reformation Gun Club, in addition to the warmth and satisfaction you get from knowing that you made this craziness called Armed Lutheran Radio possible. You get some cool Armed Lutheran swag. You get access to hundreds of hours of exclusive content that is available on our website exclusively for members of the Gun Club, and you get invitations to our monthly online hangouts. If you would like to find out more and check out the different membership levels, the lowest of which is $15.17 per year. 1517 is a little Lutheran inside joke. Or you can go to the top level. I think there are four tiers. The top tier is $15.17 per month. And there's a couple of levels in between. And each of those levels has different benefits and all that stuff is available for you to find on the website, reformationgunclub.com. Check that out today and come join us. We would love to see you at a future online hangout. Again, the next one, the August 2023 hangout, will be this coming week. And look for an announcement for that. This week, as I said, is a variety show with Mia and Sergeant Bill. And today, my contribution to the variety show is I wanted to talk a little bit about instincts. Lately here at the Armed Lutheran compound, we've been doing some spring cleaning, so to speak. Summer cleaning, I guess, since it's 110 degrees outside. Some things we're just selling off some stuff that's been taking up space in our closets and our rooms and our offices around the house. Kids' clothing that no longer fits, adult clothing that no longer fits. I've sold a couple of guitars, some books, my old reloading equipment, a couple of guns. I know. I sold a couple of guns, but hey, I haven't shot. Sadly, I have not fired a gun in almost 3 years, and I had a few that were taking up space in the safe, just collecting dust. They were becoming safe queens, as they're called in the gun world. I have enough safe queens as it is, but those are mostly kind of keepsake items. You know, my first gun, my son's first gun, my great-grandfather's old Ranger 22, a couple or three old shotguns that were handed down by family. So I had a couple that were they had no purpose. They had no use except to just take up a space on the wall in my gun safe downstairs. So I decided that that the money would be better than the dust that I was collecting. And for those of you who are not familiar with this concept, selling guns privately is a thing. It depends on where you live. If you live in one of the freer states like Texas, you can sell a firearm to a private party without going through a gun store or getting a background check or any of that stuff. But that's not universally true across the country. And for those of you who may have never done this before, I wanted to talk about some important points to keep in mind, because this is not like just, selling an old pair of jeans on eBay or on, Facebook Marketplace. So there are some points that you need to keep in mind if you're going to do this that will help you to stay safe. And the number one thing, of course, is to know the laws in your state, know how and where you can actually sell a firearm, because you can get yourself into hot water if you attempt to do these things and you don't know what you're doing. You can't list a gun for sale on Facebook. You will lose your Facebook account. You can't do it on any of the social media platforms. They will deplatform you. They will cancel your account. You cannot, for example, sell a gun, take payment through PayPal. You can't sell a gun on eBay. eBay, even as far as I can tell, has restrictions on the size of the magazines. You can sell magazines, but the size of the magazine is restricted to whatever the lowest common denominator is across the country. Some states allow standard capacity magazines to be sold. Other states limit you to 15 rounds. Other states limit you to 10. And so I think eBay's limit is like 10 rounds. So know the laws, know the requirements in the platform that you're going to be using, however you're going to be listing the item, so that you don't get yourself either into legal trouble or, have some consequence with your social media accounts. If your state requires a background check, or if the buyer has to have a purchase permit like is required I think is still required in North Carolina. It used to be. And there is a number of states that require the buyer to have a purchase permit if they're buying a handgun. Whatever the requirement is, know that requirement, know those requirements, and do that. And I know it's easy and it's common for those of us in the gun community to scream, "Shall not be infringed" at the top of our lungs when we see these requirements. But don't. Just don't. Follow the laws, and then you can scream about it later. Just don't get yourself into trouble because render unto Caesar. We may not agree with the laws that are on the books, but that doesn't give us the right, simply because we don't agree with them, to break them. Follow the law. Work to change the law if you don't like it, but do it legally. We complain all the time about how gun control laws only affect law-abiding citizens. But that kind of assumes that we, citizens, are law-abiding in the first place. So keep that in mind. Don't go breaking the law because you don't agree with it. Now, the next point is that you want to take precautions when meeting a buyer or a seller. So this applies in either case. If you are buying a gun or if you're selling a gun. These are some considerations that will keep you safe. First, of course, being meet in public. You don't want to go meet somewhere privately. Don't go meet them at their home. Don't go meet them, off the side of the road somewhere. Make sure it is a public place, and make sure, obviously, you're not going to be like standing on the curb in front of Walmart or whatever, transferring a gun to somebody. But so you might go to a Walmart parking lot, for example, but you don't want to be so far away from people that if something happens, you can't call for help. You also want to make sure you're meeting during the day. We've also heard these stories about people who sold something on Craigslist, maybe not even gun related. They get mugged when they show up to do the transfer. That's because they weren't considering their safety when it came to meeting the people that they had agreed to buy something from or to sell something to. Don't assume that the person you're buying or selling from is a good person necessarily. They may turn out to be fantastic people, and everyone I've ever bought or sold a gun from privately has been awesome. But there have been some cases of people who have tried to buy guns from me that were not so awesome, and I'll talk about those later when we talk about instincts. So don't assume that the person that you're buying from or selling to is a good person. Go into the transaction assuming that they could be the worst person on the face of the planet, and that if you meet them in a dark private place, you might end up in the trunk of their car. Just go into it with that attitude. Get there early. Wherever you agree to meet, be there early so you can kind of stake the place out and figure out what's traffic like. How do I get in and out of the place? If I have to leave the place quickly, how do I get home from this place? How do I get out? If the parking lot has a strange arrangement, how do you get in and out of the place quickly? You don't want to get stuck, and you want to be able to find your way home. And maybe to have and you also want to find a spot. You want to get there early enough that you can find the best spot where you can sort of stake out your place to make sure, one, that you're not right on top of a bunch of people. Obviously, you don't want people watching what you're doing while you're selling a gun. You don't want them to get the wrong idea or buying a gun. But you also want to make sure that it's public enough. You also want to make sure that you can see vehicles approaching from various angles. So you don't want to put one of the worst possible things to do would be to, say, park in a place where you have to constantly be looking in your mirrors in all directions to look for that person coming, or to watch out for someone who might be sneaking up on your vehicle. Back yourself into a spot where cars can't approach you from behind, and where you don't need to constantly be looking in mirrors and you can see all the possible approaches. Keep your car running during the transaction. So if something were to happen and you needed to leave quickly, you could. The last thing you want to have to do is fiddle with car keys and trying to get your car started when there's some sort of a situation that involves your safety. Another good recommendation would be to have somebody come with you. Now, I have conducted a number of private sales and purchases, and this is not always the case that someone is with you or with me when this transaction takes place. It really depends on where we're meeting and how I feel going into the transaction. But having someone with you is a good idea. And make sure that as you're communicating with the person you're going to meet, that they understand that you're bringing someone with you. Now I'll leave that one up to you. Sometimes that can communicate to the other person that there's a potential threat to them, because hopefully they're taking the same precautions that you are, but it might also give them the impression that you're taking your safety seriously. And that they're not, give them a little doubt if they're actually intending to do something nefarious. So it's up to you whether you want to let the buyer or the seller know that you're bringing someone with you, and preferably that someone is armed. I would recommend that you be the person to specify the place to meet. If at all possible, I would be the person calling that shot. You want it to be somewhere that you are familiar with. So part of that getting there early is to familiarize yourself with the ins and outs of the meeting place. But if you already know the location, if you're already familiar with the location, that will help you, at least in terms of being able to navigate your way there. It also would minimize the possibilities of surprises. And if the person is resistant to your suggestions, then I would take that kind of thing as a bad sign. We'll get to that again when I talk about instincts here in a minute. And going back to the point about having someone come with you, this is a point that I really wanted to stress for ladies in the audience. I have actually met, on more than one occasion, a woman who was buying a firearm from me, and she showed up to the meet by herself. In one case, with a child in the back seat, which I thought was incredibly dangerous. The one where the lady met me and she had a child in the car, it was dusk before we met. That was to me, a terrible idea. So for you ladies out there, I would suggest that if you can't have someone with you when you meet the person to buy the firearm, I wouldn't do it. I would arrange for a time and a place when someone can be with you. Just don't take that chance and go by yourself. Some other suggestions that you might consider that I have done in the past: recording your interaction. When that person pulls up, your phone has a voice recorder on it. I would start recording. I wouldn't take out a camera. Now, if you have a camera in your car, like a traffic camera or something like this, a dashboard camera, you might consider turning that and having it turned on. But have your phone on and with a voice recorder running during the transaction, so that you record, if necessary. You might be recording evidence if something were to go wrong that you could use in contacting law enforcement. You might also have a family member on the phone with you. If you can't have someone with you, at least have a family member or a friend on the phone listening to the conversation and the transaction as it takes place. And this is up to you. I have done this somewhat. You might suggest the use of a cash payment app, something like, I'm not going to suggest Venmo because I think probably Venmo has similar restrictions to PayPal. I think they're owned by PayPal, but there may be other apps out there that you might use to make payments to people if that feels safer, and if you could suggest that rather than using cash so that you're not carrying around a big wad of cash, that might be the safer thing to do. And if the seller or the buyer is resistant to that idea, then you might consider that a red flag. One last thing on precautions. Before you actually meet, make sure you have the name of the buyer, you have their phone number, and preferably a model and color of their vehicle. And give that information along with the location that you're meeting and the firearm that the information about what you're selling. Leave that for a loved one. If you're going by yourself, and even if you're not, have that information written down somewhere and left behind so that if, let's say, you go out to buy this firearm or sell a firearm and something happens and they don't hear from you within whatever specified period of time, what agreed period of time is up to you, depending on how far you have to drive for the meet. And just say, look, if you don't hear from me in X number of hours, then call the police and give this information to them so that they know who you met, where you met, and for what purpose. And if you can give the serial number of the firearm that you're selling, that would be helpful too, so that you're also reporting potentially a stolen firearm. Now let's one last little section on precautions that can help to make your transaction, your meet, safer. Create hoops for your buyer. And by this, I mean hoops for them to jump through. I don't mean make it absurdly difficult or inordinately difficult for them to complete this transaction, but you can put in place some common sense. I know there's that phrase, but in this case, it actually applies. Some common sense things for your buyer to follow that will make you safer. Like I mentioned before, meeting in a public place. You specifying the meeting place and time. Refusing to meet at your home or at the buyer's home. Refusing to meet after dark, specifying that place where you're going to meet and not accepting suggestions of places that you're not comfortable with, requiring certain forms of ID. In Texas, the buyer simply needs to have a valid Texas driver's license. You might say, well, I will only sell to you if you have a license to carry, or a concealed carry permit, whatever they call it in your state. That requirement will weed out some of the weirdos and some of the potential issues. And if they're willing to show you that ID, right, when you get there, make sure the first thing you do is, I want to see the ID. That's a precaution that you need to take. Requiring the buyer to sign a bill of sale. I have in past, if the buyer, I now require, if I sell a handgun, I want the buyer to have a license to carry. If they don't, I will require that they sign a bill of sale. And if they refuse to do that, or if they're not comfortable with doing that, if they don't just write out, say, yeah, that's no problem, then I'm not going to sell to them. And the final point that I've sort of alluded to previously, this is really the main point, and that is trusting your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, back out. You don't need the money as much as you need to be safe. So here are some personal examples I want to give you. And as I said, I sort of alluded to earlier, some examples of red flags. And this is the proper use of the red flag term. This is not the negative gun control use of red flag. This is the red flag that goes off that you say, oh, hey, that doesn't seem right. That should warn you that maybe this isn't the person you need to be dealing with. I had a guy contact me once who was interested in something I was selling, and we agreed on a price. And when I asked to confirm that the guy had a license to carry, he said no. So I asked him if he had a valid Texas driver's license. He said yes. He didn't offer that information to begin with. It was concerning if the person seems to be unwilling to provide you details about themselves. For example, if they're not keen on giving you their name or their phone number or the make and model of the vehicle, those kinds of things. If they are hesitant to sign a bill of sale if you require it, or if they hem and haw around about whether or not they have a license to carry, whether even after you've required that they have one, then trust your instincts on that and don't go through with it. I had another guy once tell me he didn't have a license to carry, but his wife did. To which I responded, am I selling to you or am I selling to your wife? This gets back to the thing about knowing the law. You can't, if you negotiate a price, a sale with someone, and the buyer, it turns out that the person that you've been negotiating with has not actually got the required documentation or identification to take possession of the firearm, then you're basically participating in a straw purchase. As soon as you know that, you should back out and make it clear to them that you're not going to complete the transaction for that reason. One guy contacted me and we were texting, and his English was off. It was strange. And there was a kind of the spidey sense thing in the back of my head. And we got down to brass tacks, and I found out that he wasn't even a citizen. He had a green card. He didn't have a driver's license, but his wife did. Again, it was one of those. So like, nope, you're not a citizen. I'm not selling you the guns. Sorry. There was another who called me like 10 minutes before we were going to meet. And I had been there already for about 15 minutes scouting out the location. And he said something had come up and he couldn't make it, but he'd send his wife to pick up the guns. Again, no. I texted him back and I was like, no, that's not the way this works. That's called, I'm not selling the guns to your wife. I'm selling the guns to you. So that felt to me like entrapment. That felt to me like, oh, okay, so you've worked out a deal to buy these guns from me, and now you're just going to check and see if maybe I'd be cool with giving the guns to your wife instead. That felt like the ATF all over it. It was just weird. Most recently, I was talking about magazines and magazine capacity earlier. I had listed some magazines for sale on a site, and they're standard capacity. They're 17 rounds, and they're for a gun I no longer own. And I got a message through that site that I was using for the listing, and it said that, hey, please email me at this address. I want to buy. So I did, and I said, yep, they're still available. Here's the price. And I got a really weird I got a really weird email in response. And tell me, I'm going to read this to you, and you tell me if this strikes you as odd. Hi, thanks for your great response. My response, I don't know how great my response was. It was basically, yes, they're still for sale. Here's the price. It wasn't like flowery. I don't know. This right off the bat, first sentence struck me as weird. I'm still interested in buying. I'm in Miami, Florida currently for a contract job because I do travel around the state. Now that struck me as odd because I had the items listed on a Texas-specific site. Okay. I have a federal firearms license, FFL, to receive the firearm for me if you are willing to ship it once you receive your payment. Mind you, I'm not selling a gun. This is for magazines. And I can also have my local picker come pick up the gun, again, not selling a gun, with a copy of my FFL document if you are unable to ship. Please note that the pickup will take place once I receive your payment. What? Once I receive your payment. I'm not paying him. He's paying me. I will be mailing a bank cashier's check as a means of payment to you. Once you deposit the check, it will get cleared immediately in your account or within the next 24 hours. I want you to get back to me with the following information in order to facilitate the mailing of the check to you. Full name, full physical address, zip code, cell phone number. Please note that the check will be mailed out to you via Federal Express or United Postal Service so that the transaction can be completed before you ship the firearm. Please kindly withdraw the advert from the site and consider it sold. I'm really willing to have this. Thanks. Now, what red flags are jumping out at you about this? Am I overreacting to think this is weird? This is a really strange and oddly specific request for information to simply sell a handful of magazines to someone. All this talk about FFLs and pickers and providing documentation about FFLs and bank cashier's checks. This sounds weird. So I wrote back and I said, this sounds like you're expecting a gun. I'm not selling a gun. This listing is only for magazines. And they wrote back, yes, I'm interested in the magazines, and yes, the payment option I could render now is the bank cashier's check. Kindly get back to me with the requested information for the check to be sent to you. Now, does that sound odd to you? It does to me. I'm not going to be sending this strange person my full name and address and cell phone number. Something to consider in selling standard capacity magazines is that there are commie states like New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Illinois, California, and others where the size of the capacity of the magazine is restricted. I mentioned that earlier. This person sounds weird, and though they are in Florida working on a contract, whatever that means, Florida is a free state, but I don't have any idea if they actually live in that state and if they're just if this is a scam to get magazines that are actually illegal where they live. Maybe I'm overthinking this, but it sounds strange. The big argument that gun grabbers often make when they point out that the gun laws in their state, I'm looking at you, Illinois, for example, is that their laws would actually work if their neighboring states had the same restrictions. So don't be a part of the problem by selling stuff to people out of state who sound like fishy like this, like this guy. Now, my apologies for assuming the person's gender. It could be a gal. After all, the email does say Vivian Ryan at whatever, but who knows? The point is, trust your instincts. You may overreact. You may be overreacting. The person that you're dealing with may be completely on the up and up. But don't let the dollar signs override your safety concerns, because your safety is more important than whatever amount of money you might be getting for selling that item. So trust your instincts. Trust your gut. If something seems off to you, back out of the deal. Keep yourself safe and sell to someone else, even if it means you don't get quite as much money. It's better that you trust your instincts and keep yourself safe. Okay, that's my thoughts for this week. Long-winded way of saying be careful when selling guns online or to private parties. So just a few things there for you to keep in mind to stay safe if and when you ever do that sort of thing. If you have any comments or questions about that, feel free to fire off a message at the armedlutheran.us/feedback page. We'd love to hear from you. And now it's time for me to shut up and step out of the way so you can hear from my awesome cast. Mia Anstein is up next, followed by Sergeant Bill Sylvia. We will talk to you next week for our August 2023 Reformation Gun Club online hangout. Again, if you would like to join us for that or for future hangouts, visit reformationgunclub.com. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Time now for Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Well, hey, hi, hello, you all. I'm so happy to be visiting with you again. And I'm kind of giggling because, oh my goodness, doesn't time fly? Lloyd mentioned in the last episode how busy he's been and how much he's had going on. And I bet probably most of you have a ton going on as well. It seems like the last time I was visiting with you all, I was preparing for Hunter Ed, and today I'm preparing for Hunter Ed as well. It's been my goal to have a class every month, and I've done pretty well at that this year. I'm over 50%, so I say that's pretty well because you all know, or maybe you don't know, I am super busy. I'm on a lot of boards and committees and steering committees and all kinds of stuff. So I'm a super busy lady, and I'm still an outdoor writer. I'm working on some content right now for a couple of major publications. So I try to share those on my social media outlets. You can find one recently about horseback hunting. And that one I wrote for Swarovski Optic. They are, bar none, my favorite optic company. And I know a lot of people say, oh, you must be sponsored. Nope, actually, I'm not. Man, I've been trying to get sponsored by them for a while, though, but just not happening. Anyways, I'm kind of joking around, but I am an outdoor writer, so I do get a media deal from a lot of different companies. But Swarovski is a favorite, and I was super stoked when they asked me to write a little piece about horseback hunting here in the United States. And it's something that I wrote because if you've been listening for a while, you know I'm a little bit old school. Like, I love lever actions. I love revolvers. Muzzle loaders, they're okay. They're not like my passion. But it's those old school firearms that I really love. And I love hunting old school. So taking those horses up into the mountains, pitching a camp, living off the land for a few days, that is what it's all about. Super fun and exciting. And so if you kind of scour my social media, I haven't been sharing a lot of what they call trophy shots, and that's a grip and grin. That's a picture of you and whatever animals you've harvested. And I haven't really been sharing a ton of those because I've been trying to share more of a message of sustainability and of conservation. When we're talking about that sustainability, conservation, and that kind of thing, I'm not sure if all of you that are listening really understand what that means and primarily what conservation is. And this is something that I've really had to dedicate my passion and a lot of my time to, and that's explaining what conservation is, because there are a lot of people who don't understand hunting, who are against hunting, and who want to eliminate hunting. And this is something, if you're a non-hunter, just hang on for a minute and give me some time so that I can kind of explain this to you, because I am a hunter. I do hunt for food, but primarily I hunt for conservation. Conservation, what that is the wise use of a resource. And so whatever the resource is, if it's water, if it is hay, if it's grass, if it's trees, if we're going to use it, we want to conserve it. So we don't go in and clear cut trees anymore, right? Because when we clear cut, it eliminates the whole forest. So now in a conservation manner, you go in there and you thin the forest so that it can still live and grow and thrive. And so basically with hunting, it's similar kind of deal. I want people to understand that, no, I don't have to hunt. I have money. I can go to the store. I can buy my groceries, that kind of thing. But there is so much of a reward when you head out and you work hard and you put the effort in and you try to outsmart an animal on their own turf, or you head out during waterfowl season and it's cold and you're shivering in a blind and setting up decoys in just the right way so that you can get a flock of ducks or geese to come in. It's a challenge. And when you work hard and you embrace that challenge and you happen to tag an animal, it is so rewarding. And that is something that I'm not sure if a lot of people understand anymore, because how rewarding is it to sit at our desk and punch a button, or actually now I have the apps on my phone. Like I go shopping on my phone and I push a button and bing, bada bing, it shows up right on the doorstep. And it's pretty cool, but it's not actually rewarding. It's more like social media. It's an addiction. So this hunting thing, for people who don't understand, there's the work reward process. And to me, that reward is one of the ultimate rewards. And I have a whole drawer full of hunting licenses that are not filled, that I never filled those. So each time we head out hunting, we don't always get to harvest that animal that we were in pursuit of. I wanted to back up a little bit. And if you're a hunter, pay attention, because you need to be explaining this message to non-hunters, because there is a serious attack on hunting that is going on in the United States. And there are several states that I know of, and I've talked to senators and representatives about it, and they're like, my state is very conservative. We're never going to lose hunting. Well, I tell you what, you look at Colorado and how we were 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you would have said the same thing. So you need to be proactive and help explain this to voters, because we're losing this not only by the ballot box and the elections, because elections and these officials really matter, not just for the abortion issues and gun issues, but also for hunting. It's another issue that elections are serious, and we have had some major consequences. So I want you to understand conservation and hunting and how they go together. So let me kind of back up even more and talk to you about the North American model of wildlife management. And what that is it came into being after the settlers had come over from Europe to America. And when those settlers came, they were coming from areas where only the elite were allowed to hunt. It was the parliaments and kings and queens, and that was who got to hunt. So when they came to America, they were free from that. And it was like, wow, there's all this abundant game and wild areas. And they did go a little haywire, and they were killing more than they needed to. And the populations began to plummet. They were killing for fur. They were killing for meat. They were selling the meat. All of these things were going on. And then around the time of Theodore Roosevelt, he realized that our resource was diminishing and something needed to be done. And so he and other leaders in North America primarily created the North American model of wildlife management. And there are 7 pillars to that. And I want to go through those just real quickly. I don't want to take too much of your time. But one of those is that wildlife is held in public trust. It doesn't belong to the president. It doesn't belong to our governors, senators, representatives, or our mayors or anything like that. It's held in public trust. It belongs to the people. Number 2 is that market hunting of wild game is illegal. So we cannot go and hunt wild game and sell that meat. We also have laws now that regulate the use of the resource. In addition to that, there is no frivolous use of the resource, and that's part of the rules and the purposes of the use. So those all go together. And then additionally, wildlife is an international resource. And why so is because we have birds. I just talked about waterfowl hunting. We have birds that migrate all the way from South America all the way up north to Canada. And so it's international, and we work with other countries to help regulate and make sure these populations stay sustainable. And part of that is one of the other pillars, which is scientific management of the wildlife. And that scientific management is super important because what is happening in these movements to eliminate hunting is they're bringing in emotion. They're ignoring the science, and actually, even in some cases, they're skewing the science and they're finding people that will give them the correct answers. And this is the same with the gun issues. We've seen it. But part of that North American model is let's look at the science. Let's see what the animals are doing. Let's see how we can manage them. The last rule, and these are in no particular order. I always save this one for last because to me it's a super big deal. But the North American model of wildlife conservation guarantees an opportunity for all. That means it's not just for the rich. It's not just for our leaders. It's not just for a certain race or class or males or females. It guarantees an opportunity for everybody. So if you follow those rules and laws that were mentioned before and you go and get your hunter education, then you can go hunt. And whoa. You don't get to go hunt right away. You probably have to go either buy or apply or join a lottery to get a hunting license before you can go hunting. So that's something I think some non-hunters don't understand is we actually have to go through a process to get a hunting license. We don't just get to go out there and shoot everything that we see. So I wanted to just give you that quick rundown on the North American model and about conservation and serve it as an education for those who maybe didn't know. But also, if you're a hunter, it's a reminder to you because you need to go and spread the news and share the word about the good things that hunters are doing for the outdoors. And what I'm seeing in our neck of the woods, I live in Colorado, for those of you who don't know, but here, what they're trying to do is eliminate the hunters and allow the animals to manage themselves. They want it to be like it was 100, 200 years ago. The problem with that vision, I mean, it sounds wonderful. It sounds magnificent. The problem with that vision is that now we have millions of people in our state. We have billions of people in the whole country. Like there are so many people that you cannot eliminate the people from the equation. And since we have overtaken all of the wildlife's habitat and space and their terrain there, it means that we have to be an equation in the management of the wildlife. And that doesn't mean killing all the animals. It means if we have too much of, let's look at New Mexico. New Mexico, they have the prairie chickens down there, and they have been listed and delisted and as endangered animals. And now they're going to be relisted again on the Endangered Species Act. But in New Mexico, they've eliminated trapping on public land. Some people think trapping is evil. It's not. It's a tool. It's a tool that we use to capture and relocate animals. It's a tool. And so in New Mexico, no more trapping of predators on public land. And we have this bird that is becoming an endangered animal. Do we blame this on the humans, or do we blame it on an abundance of predators that are raiding these birds' nests? There's this whole dynamic that we have to look at when we're looking at wildlife management and conserving our resource. Maybe we could take a few more of those predators to help those birds thrive and survive and become healthy, vibrant populations. So that's how hunters, and in that case, trappers are also hunters. That is how we play a role in wildlife management. And I just wanted to share that with you today because I'm headed to Hunter Ed and I'm going to go and teach some newbies and welcome them to the world. If you have never taken a Hunter Ed class and you're interested, go ahead and look it up online. Look for a Hunter Ed course in your area and you can go get answers to lots of questions. If you get your Hunter Ed certification, it doesn't mean that you have to hunt. It just means that you're going to be that much smarter. I hope that you have a good one, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye, guys.
You can read more from Mia, watch her YouTube videos, or check out her podcast, Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, at miaanstein.com. Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Sylvia.
Hey everybody, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Today I want to talk to you about a book that I've just been reading. It's called The Way is in Training by Matthew Little, also known as Greybeard Actual. So I took a training class with some other law enforcement professionals a couple years ago from Matt, and it was a really interesting class. He has a really good way of combining like police and military tactics and competition shooting into one basic discipline that makes you better at all of them. So a little bit of backstory on Matt. He retired from a major metropolitan SWAT team as their training coordinator and operational supervisor. He was in the U.S. Army as a Special Forces combat veteran with decades of operational, instructional, and training experience in firearms, tactics, and combatives. He's a lifelong martial artist, formerly nationally ranked competitor, yada, yada, yada. And he's a good dude. So in his class, like I said, we did a lot of competition shooting drills, but we put kind of like a police tactical spin on it, which is really good. It's good for concealed carrier, police, even competition shooters. So what prompted Matt to write this book was he had, I don't know if it was a hip injury or what it was, but he had a hip replacement, so he had to spend a lot of downtime after his replacement surgery. And his wife said, hey, you've been wanting to write a book about your combination of tactical and military and police and competition experience and how you pull it all together into your one martial way of the gun, and now's your time. So he did. This book literally touches on everything. It covers physical fitness, nutrition, supplementation, training, all the way into like your equipment, everyday carry, marksmanship fundamentals, weapon manipulations, malfunctions, target transitions, all your basic shooting stuff, low light, weapons retention, grappling, ground fighting, edge weapons, striking, vehicles, precision rifle. He literally touches a little bit of everything. And then he goes on to showing you how to actually train and how to practice and how to use competition to make you better at everything, how to test and retest, train for the fight, and train actually like an athlete. There's lots of good information in here. You can not only read the book and get a lot from it, but you can always go back to the book and reread things to further your knowledge and continue getting better as time goes on. It's divided up into different books as opposed to chapters, and they cover, so much stuff. It's unbelievable. The last couple parts of the book, he's got drills and how to use them and how he uses them, and it's a pretty comprehensive book that touches on just about every subject that you could think of that covers life, law enforcement, military, competitive shooting, concealed carry, and everything related to all of that. So you can get it on Amazon, and I definitely recommend it. I couldn't tell you how much it is, but Matt's a good guy, and if you ever get a chance to go do some of his training, check him out. Greybeard Actual, The Way is in Training by Matthew Little. Highly recommend. I've actually read all the book except for the last few sections because I kept going back and rereading stuff that was really interesting to me. So it's taken me a while to read this because it's got so many things that I keep wanting to go back and rereading, and I've been talking to a lot of people at work about. So I can't recommend it enough. It's like he took a lot of other shooting books and put them all together in his own words, and I really like it. I'm Sergeant Bill. This has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Force and a masterclass competitive shooter. You can check out his YouTube videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.